Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu believes that ending the war with Hamas now would be a grave mistake. He argues that giving in to Hamas's demands would reward terrorism and severely damage Israel's security. Netanyahu insists that Hamas seeks Israel's destruction. He believes that ending the war without achieving a decisive victory would only embolden Hamas and lead to more violence in the future. Netanyahu is determined to continue the fight until Hamas is crushed, and Gaza is no longer a launching pad for attacks against Israel. He argues that a ceasefire now would allow Hamas to regroup and rearm, which honestly would make future conflicts even more dangerous for Israel. Netanyahu believes that Hamas must be weakened militarily to prevent future attacks. He is determined to show strength and resolve in the face of terrorism. Netanyahu wants to send a clear message that Israel will not be intimidated and will defend its citizens at all costs. Netanyahu faces criticism from those who believe he is prioritizing military victory over the lives of the hostages. However, he argues that giving in to Hamas's demands would ultimately cost more Israeli lives in the long run. Netanyahu believes that a strong military response is necessary to deter future aggression. He is determined to act in what he believes is the best interest of all Israelis, even if it means making difficult decisions. Netanyahu is under immense pressure to end the conflict and bring the hostages home. However, he remains steadfast in his belief that Israel cannot afford to compromise its security. He is committed to seeing the military campaign through to its conclusion, even if it means prolonging the suffering. Netanyahu's stance is rooted in a deep sense of responsibility for the safety and security of the State of Israel. Netanyahu has also dismissed the idea of tricking Hamas with a false promise to end the war in exchange for the hostages. He argues that such a strategy is not only morally wrong but also impossible to implement. Hamas, he says, is demanding binding international guarantees for any agreement, making a deceptive deal impossible. Netanyahu believes that any attempt to deceive Hamas would backfire spectacularly. Hamas is a cunning and experienced enemy that would quickly see through any ruse. If Israel were to break a promise, it would severely damage its credibility on the world stage. This would make it even harder to negotiate future agreements and could lead to international condemnation. Netanyahu is a strong advocate for upholding international law and maintaining Israel's reputation as a reliable partner. He believes that engaging in deception would undermine these principles and ultimately harm Israel's interests. Netanyahu insists on a transparent and honest approach to negotiations, even with an enemy like Hamas. He is adamant that Israel must maintain the moral high ground in its conflict with Hamas. Netanyahu believes that resorting to deception would be a betrayal of Israel's values and would ultimately damage the country's standing in the world. He is determined to defeat Hamas through military means, but he is also committed to doing so in a way that upholds Israel's ethical principles. While he acknowledges the immense importance of bringing the hostages home, Netanyahu insists it cannot come at the price of Israel's security. He understands the pain and anguish of the families, but he believes that surrendering to Hamas's demands would only lead to more suffering in the future. Netanyahu is caught in a moral and strategic dilemma. He is deeply aware of the human cost of the conflict and the desperate plight of the hostages. However, he is also convinced that giving in to terrorism would have catastrophic consequences for Israel. Netanyahu believes that a strong and uncompromising stance is necessary to protect Israeli lives in the long term. Netanyahu is committed to exploring all possible avenues for the hostages' release. However, he refuses to negotiate under duress or make concessions that would jeopardize Israel's security. He is actively seeking international support to pressure Hamas into releasing the hostages unconditionally. The hostage crisis weighs heavily on Netanyahu's conscience. He is acutely aware of the agonizing wait for the families and is determined to bring their loved ones home safely. However, he is also determined to protect Israel from future threats and is prepared to make difficult decisions to ensure the country's long-term security.